Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Shannon Shy. Thank you for joining us today. Um, this is the Rise Beyond OCD series that I've developed. The subtitle is Answers, Insights, and Inspiration to Move Forward. I got this idea when I started the website that people only didn't want to hear from me because, I have my limitations. And I thought it would be helpful to open this up for the real smart people in the community, and I call them the icons. Everybody who's on this list that I've invited and they've agreed is the dream team that Shannon has developed relationships with over the years. I was president of the International OCD Foundation and on their board for 6 or 7 years. And I developed a lot of really good relationships with the icons of the community. I'm grateful for them. I'm blessed by them. And they are like the most wonderful people, humble people in the world, and truly just within their heart. Everybody who's on this list wants to help other people who suffer and their families. And so for me, that is just a remarkable human element that we are all grateful for. And so I'm very happy and honored that I can bring it to this. And so our guest, and I'll introduce her in a second, is Dr. Amy Mariaskin. And I'm really happy to have you here. So before we get going, there are some administrative remarks that I want to say. So whether you're living with OCD, supporting someone you love, or working in the mental health field, this is a caring space where we can learn, connect, and find hope together. What we share today is meant for education and support. It is not a substitute for professional care. If you find yourself in crisis, please reach out. You can call or text 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, or 911 if there's immediate danger. For international support, I'm very blessed that we have an international audience. You can visit findahelpline.com, findahelpline.com. Remember, you are not alone. Healing and recovery are possible, and we are here to move forward together. Before I introduce Dr. Amy Mariaskin, a couple of housekeeping items. Today's interview is being live streamed publicly in honor of OC. I'm sorry, this was when I did Liz. We're being live. This is a live stream. And like all the other interviews, this is being recorded for later viewing by members of the Unconditional Commitment Club. And to join the club, you can go to my website, ocdrecoveryturningpoints.com. Everyone will be muted, and your videos can be on or off depending on what your preference is, except my video and audio and Dr. Mary Askin's video and audio are on. The chat room is open. I ask everyone to be respectful of others and maintain decorum. We've never had a problem with that, so I don't expect one today. At the end, we're going to have a Q&A with Dr. Mary Askin, and if you have something to say, just please raise your hand with the little icon, and I'll call on you. I ask anybody who asks a question, this is not the time to go into a long personal history of how OCD affects you. I know that that's tempting, but this is not the place for it. If you have a question, just go ahead and ask the question. And if Dr. Mary Askin needs to ask you a follow-up, she will. But we'll try to get to the point so that we can leave enough room for everybody to ask the questions that they have. So with that, again, I'm very honored to have Dr. Amy Mariaskin. She's one of the people on my dream team, my A list. Dr. Mariaskin is a licensed clinical psychologist and owner and director of the Nashville OCD and Anxiety Treatment Center. She received her bachelor's degree from the University of Pittsburgh and her master's and doctoral degrees from Duke University. She completed her internship and postdoctoral work at the University of Florida and has practiced in Nashville since 2011. With respect to therapeutic orientation, Dr. Mariaskin uses various techniques that fall under the cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, umbrella, including most prominently exposure and response prevention, ERP, and acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT or ACT. Dr. Mariaskin is an adjunct professor at Vanderbilt University. That means she's really smart. where she provides supervision to graduate doctoral students and serves as faculty for the International OCD Foundation's Behavior Treatment Training Institute, BTTI. She's a member of the Anxiety and Depression Association of America, the IOCDF, the Nashville Psychotherapy Institute, and the Nashville Area Psychological Association, where she served in the past as president of its board of directors. Dr. Mariaskin has published in the field and is an active speaker at local and national conferences on the topics of OCD, anxiety, relationships, and child mental health. She has been featured as an anxiety expert in various media. And most recently, Dr. Mariaskin is the author of Thriving in Relationships When You Have OCD, How to Keep Obsessions and Compulsions from Sabotaging Love, Friendship, and Family Connections. And I encourage everybody to check out that book. You can find it on Amazon. It's probably the first good place to start. So, welcome, Dr. Amy Mariaskin, to the program. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. I really appreciate you inviting me. And I would say if I had a list of OCD community icons who are not therapists, you would be on that list. So I think this is a meeting of the icons. Um, I saw the other list and it's interesting. I mean, I know we talk about for a lot of people with anxiety and OCD, there's this sense of self-doubt and imposter syndrome and like that just never goes away. I saw the list of the other speakers and I was like, oh, well, he slipped me in there accidentally and
Oh,
I'm
no, no
glad to be.
way. There's little that I do accidentally. So, okay, I'm really, really happy you're here. So let's jump into it. You've
Mhm.
built an incredible career helping people with OCD. Can you take us back to what first drew you to this work? Was there a moment when you knew that this was the field for you?
Yeah, there were a lot of things that kind of coalesced at once, things that co-occurred. And I was a graduate student and I had initially gone to graduate school for I was researching the study of the development of emotion regulation in infants. And so it was very research oriented. We were doing the second by second facial affect coding of infants, which means you watch videos of infants in slow motion. And second by second, I had to determine is this positive emotion, negative emotion, or neutral emotion? And the babies were sort of subjected to different stressors. And that data was correlated with some physiological data, like what was their heart rate doing and things like that. It was it was interesting. It was a lot of like math and statistics and, like really heavy kind of science. And I was in a clinical psych program. And so I thought, well, I also have to see clients and I have to kind of, see if I like that. I suspected I would, but I wasn't sure how much I would like it or if it would be my cup of tea because I tend to be sort of a more analytical person. And once I started seeing clients, I was like, wow, this is so much more meaningful than, in the research world, you might put out an article and then it's 10 years later, maybe it has an impact. And I was seeing real time impact of my clients. So I started clinical work, and that's three things happened at once. I got my first client with OCD about 2 weeks after I got my own OCD diagnosis, and I was 24 at the time, had been having symptoms since I was 6 years old, primarily in the realm of contamination symptoms. And just didn't know what it was a quirky kid, which I think would be true without OCD. I think I'm just a quirky person. And so everybody kind of was like, well, she does these like odd, repetitive things. Um, so I got my own diagnosis and then I got assigned my first client with OCD. And my academic advisor, who was studying infant emotion regulation, said, I'm moving to Penn State. And I said, that sounds cold. I'd rather stay in North Carolina. So it was academically orphaned and was able to select a new area of research. And I thought, well, research is me search. I'm going to study OCD. It's going to help me understand myself. It's going to help me understand my clients, and I have the opportunity to do that. So that's when it all happened. And I was quite worried that I wouldn't be effective in working with people with OCD, that I might have, too much of a bias, like, oh, this having my own experience. And I found that it was the opposite. I found it was a way to connect on a different level and to be able to empathize not only from an intellectual place, but really from an emotional, human, and relational place. And never looked back. It's just the most fulfilling, most creative treatment. And the relationships that I've developed with other professionals in the community, with people with lived experience like yourself, and with clients have been um, like a highlight of my life.
I thank you for sharing that about yourself, right? I love the research is me search thing. I had not
Mhm.
heard that.
Yeah.
Um, I hear from people all the time, right? And I'm probably the biggest advocate for therapy. I tell people go to therapy, right? People who've been trained and just like they've immersed themselves in training to become. And certainly for somebody who has lived experience and is a therapist, like you have the double whammy, because I hear all the time when they're talking to a therapist who doesn't have OCD, they understand it, they've studied it, trained it, they see it, but they still don't know
Mhm.
what it feels like to be burdened by this. So if you have the experience and you're a therapist, like you're on another level, I think. And this is not to take away from, let's say, everybody else on my list who doesn't, because they are truly remarkable therapists and help people. They get help people. But you sharing that you have OCD, right? And obviously you've done well in your own recovery, right? You're at the top of the game in doing what you want to do. And for everybody listening, it doesn't matter what you do in life, right? It's important to understand that whatever you do in life, it's going to be more fulfilling. You're going to be more productive if you are unburdened by the adverse effects of OCD, right? So you can get to the top of your game. So thank you for sharing that. All right, you founded your own practice, Nashville OC, Nashville OCD and Anxiety Treatment Center. You teach, as I mentioned, you're an adjunct professor. You're an instructor for the IOCDF BTTI. You write, right? You've contributed to professional articles and you published your own book. That's a lot. Uh,
I know, right? Like I told
what
myself,
personal mission, right? What personal mission ties it all together for you?
well,
What's
it's
your
funny.
personal mission?
Yeah, what I was gonna say is as you were talking, I was like, oh my gosh, get a life, girl. Like, what else have you done outside of work? Which I am working on that. We were having a little conversation about that earlier, but yeah, it never felt like I was neglecting other parts of my life because it was something, it was what was fueling me was my own sense of how I got my life back, from OCD and what how profound that was, not only for like symptom reduction, but also for the way that I look at myself, the way that I see myself as resilient. I never thought when I was younger that I would see myself as like a strong, resilient person. I always thought like, well, you're just things are just harder for you and you don't know why, but they just are. And that tremendous amount of shame. So I think that's a lot of it. And yeah, just my personal mission, I think I have been lucky enough to find a way that I can make a difference that feels it feels like I have, the experience and the knowledge and just the temperament to be able to be in this field. I wanted to be a writer from when I was young, so being able to write a book about something I'm passionate about, it just kind of all made sense to branch out and do that. I don't know if I'll ever write another book, or at least not like that type of book, like a self-help book, but. Yeah, it's really been, it's that, again, it's the personal as well as the community itself makes it really easy. There are all kinds of opportunities to be involved. Being involved, like here, just you just reached out. This is what happens in this community. We support each other. So yeah, that's what I would say for that.
Okay, so let's talk about OCD. Um, I think Shannon, and I look back at my own personal experience, it was immensely helpful for me to figure out how the disorder worked, like what it what it wanted from me. And I think it's helpful for people to just understand about OCD. So many people still think, and this drives me nuts, and I think everybody on this thing, it drives you nuts when you see references, dismissive or minimizing type references to OCD. Um, and many people still think OCD is just about hand washing or being neat. What's something that you wish everyone understood about what OCD really is?
Mm. If I had to choose one, I think the tremendous amount of mental energy and like cognitive resources, like how much your brain is just going and going and going. Not everybody has overt compulsions, but for those who do have, repetitive behaviors that others can see, even with that, that is the tip of the iceberg. That is the tip of the iceberg. It's the what's underneath the mental anguish, the shame, the intrusive thoughts. I think it's just people don't realize how much suffering there can be. And I think whenever I see something that trivializes OCD, it's subtracting this really crucial part of what OCD is and how it manifests, which is that there's the feeling of both knowing that something is, irrational and yet feeling compelled just in case to do it. And I think that is a unique place for shame to sort of proliferate because you have people who don't understand it being like, well, just stop doing X, Y, and Z. Or why are you so distracted? Or why do you not seem present? And I think it's because I think the brains of people with OCD, they become quite efficient because if you have like 90% of your brain just doing this loop, over and over and over again. I mean, it's a wonder that anything else can get finished, can get done. So yeah, I would say everything that's going on beneath the surface and the tremendous amount of shame. I think being somebody who has experienced some anxiety that's kind of your more run-of-the-mill, like social anxiety type, or generalized anxiety, and then experiencing OCD, not to not to say, one disorder is harder than the other or anything like that, but I think that a lot of times when people conflate OCD with just like being particular, being a little bit anxious, for me that the feeling, the amount of shame and dread and sort of darkness, which is not a clinical term, I know, but the amount of darkness that OCD
Yeah.
brings is I think that's what comes up for me. Is like, you have no idea when people say, well,
That's exactly what I was just going to say. When people when they start talking about it but don't really know.
mm,
Even, I work with a lot of people, and I'm sure you do. I know you do. Um, their family members are pretty educated about OCD, right? Family members who are living with all of the problems that OCD brings into the house. Family members are very educated about OCD
mhm,
and they're trying to help, but the person suffering, even then, looks at family members like we would look at anybody else and say, you have no idea how real this is, how real the risk feels, the amount of guilt or shame or whatever I'm experiencing. Even when you say, why are you worried about that? Right? Nobody else on the planet is worried about that. And you say, I don't know, but I feel it. It's here. And particularly with guilt and shame, they are powerful drivers. Because we don't want it. Naturally, we don't want it, and we do whatever. So, how do you? We're going to talk a little bit more about treatment, ERP, and that stuff in a minute. But on that topic, what do you say to people who are feeling that immense guilt or shame, um, and then that overwhelming perceived need to do something to fix it right now?
mm.
Uh, what do you tell them?
Yeah, it's so tough because a lot of times what OCD does is it takes advantage of the very lovely parts of human nature. So it sort of takes advantage of one of the things is the capacity for empathic behavior or for having, a strong moral compass. And I think those are things, those are lovely qualities. takes advantage of, faith sometimes. It sort of takes something that is a deeply held belief or value, and it really sort of skews it so that it's almost like perfectionism applied to that. And so people who are experiencing a lot of guilt, oftentimes the reason for guilt is, well, I'm having these terrible thoughts. I'm having these just unconscionable thoughts. I must be a bad person if I'm having thoughts when I see a loved one or I see a vulnerable person and I'm thinking thoughts of harm, or I'm seeing images, it must reveal something about my character. I would say with that, the first step, assuming that they've had the education about that is not your choice, that's the way OCD works. In fact, the reason that those images and urges and thoughts are so incredibly abhorrent to you is because you wouldn't do, because that's not something you intend to do, because that's not within your value system. So assuming they've had that education, which honestly takes a while. It takes a while, I think, for that to sink in. It takes being in communities like this where you can hear other people saying aloud, yeah, I've had this incredibly disturbing, intrusive thought, and I felt shame for years before I knew what it was. And then I think after that, almost like helping people trust themselves that, hey, I can experience this feeling of guilt. And instead of trying to rationalize your way out of it, well, I would never do that. Well, I would never do that. Well, I would never do that. If it's happening a whole bunch, it's probably a compulsive pattern. Saying, oof, this feels really bad in my body. I don't like this feeling. And I know that this is one of the things OCD does. So how can I reorient myself to doing what I was doing before? It's a little bit of a shift, right? Because it's not trying to get rid of the guilt or argue with the guilt. It's just kind of being compassionate about, oh, I don't like how this feels, but I'm going to live as if I am somebody who's not a monster, because guess what? I haven't actually been a monster. I've actually been a prisoner of my mind. Sometimes people come in and they're like, I'm having these terrible thoughts of stabbing people or harming people. And I'm like, well, how many people have you like assaulted? And they're like, what? Yeah, yeah. How many? Just tell me, like, are we talking like, 1 to 5? Is it 10? Well, I never. Okay. Well, how about you start treating yourself, whether or not those thoughts are there, whether or not those feelings are bringing you down? How about you treat yourself as if you are somebody who you have been for your life thus far? So those are some of the things I would say.
Yeah, it's great advice. We could talk offline forever because everything that you're saying, right? Um, uh, I've either experienced it or I try to help. Well, I should say, or I'm trying to
Yeah.
help people come to that realization, right? And not in a reassurance way. It's just sort of like you can let all of this be here and
Hmm.
still demonstrate that you're not giving it value, right? That you haven't
Yes.
actually, right? So, all right, your book um, focuses on thriving in relationships when you have OCD. Uh, what does OCD tend to look like when it shows up between partners or in families?
Mm.
And then what do you, anything you wanted to talk about? We could probably spend the rest of the hour since you've written a
Yeah.
book on this topic, but we don't need to do that. But, to kind of introduce us to the topic
Mm.
and how it manifests, and then sort of what do you tell people?
Yeah. Common ways it can manifest are, there are kind of these like two poles of behavior that I often see. And sometimes when I do a lot of work with kiddos too, and so sometimes when I'm working with kids, what you'll see is parents fall into, one parent will fall on one side, one parent will fall on the other side. And that is, um, there are people who are loved ones who are unknowingly and uh, without any intention, are participating in OCD symptoms and a means to reduce distress experienced by their loved ones. So y'all have probably heard of the term accommodation. So we'll see a lot of that. Okay, well, you're worried about X, Y, and Z. You're worried about, you know, changing. changing the kid's diaper or something like that, I'm going to take care of that because you have those sexually intrusive thoughts and those are really uncomfortable. So I'm going to take that over. That would be accommodation. I don't have a black and white view about accommodation because accommodation is just like anything else is kind of on a hierarchy. So it may be that if you're, let's say you're in a partnership and you have and so one of the people in the partnership has sexually intrusive thoughts, it might be that changing the diaper is like top of the hierarchy or is really difficult. And so, yeah, the spouse is helping out with that at first. So there's accommodating. I see your distress. I don't want you to experience distress. I'm going to alleviate that distress by essentially doing the thing for you or protecting you from certain things. And it's coming from a loving place. But really, what it's giving a lot of love to OCD also. It's kind of saying, like, well, here's some more proof, so and so can't handle this. So I'm going to do it for them. So that's one way that it can manifest. On the other side, and again, when I work with kids, sometimes I'll see one parent who's accommodating. Oh, you don't have to do that. I know when you do your homework, you want to write over and over again to get your letters just so. So, how about you tell me your answers for homework, but I'll write them down. So you have the accommodating parent. And then on the other side, you can also have almost like a more punitive, unvalidating, I'm not going to accommodate at all. I know that's just your OCD. You sit down, you do it without having that sense of like validation or I know this is really hard and I know you can do it. Right? So those are kind of like two poles of what you can see. You can also simply see, and I talk about this a lot with respect to dating and romantic relationships. One thing you can also see is that if somebody is sort of pre-disclosure or they're reluctant to disclose their OCD, you can see a lot of misunderstanding about the effects of OCD. Why this is like our fifth date, and it's also the fifth time that you've been late. Do you really care about me? And if somebody's not ready to say, well, I was stuck doing rituals, it's really hard for me to leave the house. And, I worry about my house catching on fire. I worry about my dog getting out, and I get caught in these checking rituals. And then I leave the house, and then I'm not sure. So I come back. That's really vulnerable, right? So, with a lot of people who are in like dating relationships or even work relationships where there's kind of that line between do I disclose or not, you end up getting these misinterpretations of behavior. And so those are three that come to mind. And I talk about those kind of in the book and going through almost like when do you decide to disclose? And then, of course, I also see, I would be remiss to not to mention that I also see partners and family members who are like Team Shannon, like they're all coming around and they're like, okay, let's get a plan in place so that I can be unfailingly supportive to you and motivational to you while I'm not participating in your symptoms. And that's where everybody can get to.
And is that pretty much where you want people to be? Like, I mean, for whether it's a romantic partner, a family, maybe even like we could talk teachers with students who have severe
Yeah.
OCD. I'm just trying to think of employers who have people with OCD. Um,
Mhm.
is that where we really want them to be at the end and saying, I'm going to be loving and supportive, but I'm not going to participate in your rituals, or I'm not going to accommodate you, or however you want to say it. Is that pretty much where do you try to educate the family members? How do you do it?
Yeah, yeah. I do, I'll say like this is the goal, this is what it looks like. And then I do a little bit of an assessment, and some of it is formalized assessment. There's a measure out there just called the family accommodation scale. And so I'll give something like that to other people in somebody's orbit, or just with a conversation trying to figure out, okay, how are you doing on things like symptom accommodation? How are you doing on things like validation, motivation, etc.? And then based on that, saying, okay, well, it looks like for you in particular, I'm thinking of a client that I'm working with now, and she is in her 60s, and her husband is wonderful at not accommodating. I mean, he learned about OCD and he just hit the ground running, and he was like, nope, I'm not driving. You have to drive this and that. And that's been helpful. But it's been a little bit less helpful because he struggles to kind of remember, hey, it's more than just changing behavior. It's also saying, I know how hard it is for you to drive, and I'm here for you. And whatever you need while you're driving that isn't, frank reassurance, I'm going to do that. So I do a little bit of like an assessment of what the needs are. And then, I'll say, and this is going to be hard for everyone. You're changing patterns of behavior that have existed for a long, long time. And so let's all be patient to each other and kind. Let's set it up like, this isn't person with OCD against spouse. This is this team, sort of against OCD. And we're going to have to remind ourselves of that. Yeah. And so those are some of the ways that I kind of move people toward it.
The let's move it a little bit into treatment, but I think from a lens, this is where I want to go with you. From a lens of uh, hope and courage, and so stick with me here. So exposure and response prevention treatment. People hear about it,
Mm-hmm.
and therapists will talk about it as a gold standard. I'm not trying to put that word in your mouth, but that's what, generally speaking, therapists say. The gold standard is exposure and response prevention, or ERP. And I think people who suffer from it, they understand that they're going to have to do some really scary work. And so become afraid of the prospect of going through treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question is, what would you say to someone who's feeling that hesitation about entering into ERP? But in answering the question, just for the sake of the audience who don't really know about ERP, if you could give us a quick 101 on what ERP is, but then go back to that answer of what do you say to someone who's feeling the hesitation, the fear of going in, knowing, and they'd probably been told that it's going to work, but they're afraid of intentionally putting themselves into that scary place. So over to you.
Yeah, and I think it's great to marry those two questions of psychoeducation about ERP or talking a little bit about what it is with how do you motivate people, because I start by saying I think a lot of people have a very sim sort of a simplistic view of what ERP is, and that's not, or I should just say like a misinterpretation of what it is. And the interpretation is that it's coercive and it's not collaborative and it's really scary and you're just sort of forced to do things. And if that has ever been the case for anybody here, I'm very sorry because that's just not good professional ethics generally. Good therapy is consensual, collaborative, compassionate, creative. I don't know. I just felt like I should put another C word in there.
I
Creative
was,
doesn't have anything to do with it, but I was
I
like,
was
oh,
thinking of one.
yeah,
So
yeah, right, right. Caring. I mean, we could just go on. Um, but, and what I will say to people is, our field has changed so much over the past, I've been doing this 15 to 20 years. I don't know. I haven't thought about that in a while, but I've been doing it. Yeah, I guess it's been almost 20 years. And the idea that we are just looking at, well, let's find the things that you're afraid of and do them. And don't do that one thing, the compulsions that have helped you feel safe. I mean, if that's all it was, I wouldn't want to do it. And I frankly wouldn't want to tell anybody else to do it. And how we've kind of evolved with this is, listen, if I'm your therapist, I want to know who you are and I want to know what's important to you. And I want to get a sense of the type of person you are, the type of values you hold, and the ways in which OCD is preventing you from living by those values. That's number one. And then from there, that is where we're going to build in what we call exposures, which are, okay, so here are the situations. If you're a person of faith who really wants to get back to going to church, but you're having intrusive thoughts about if I go to church, X, Y, and Z, or when I go to church, or I had that one bad thought, and what if, um, what if I'm being judged or things like that? What if I have a blasphemous thought? Okay, so that's a really big goal for you is to go back to church. I am going to concentrate on your goals and create exposures that will progressively get you closer and closer to fulfilling that goal, living by that value, as opposed to hey, you're afraid of this, that, and the other. Let's just rank the things that you're avoiding. There may be some things that you've been avoiding, or that would be, let me put it this way, there may be some things that would be provocative to your OCD that you wouldn't want to do with or without OCD. And I'm not going to concentrate on those. I'm not going to arbitrarily say, oh, you know what, it would be really scary to go skydiving. It's top of your hierarchy. Let's do it, unless you really want to go skydiving, in which case, let's go. Let's do it. I'll do it with you. That sounds amazing. Um, so I think in terms of hopeful, in terms of that hesitation, I would say, and I'm somebody who like I kind of live the exposure life now. I am somebody who was, I mentioned I had social anxiety, and now, I do speaking and things like that. I am in front of audiences a lot. Is my heart racing when I almost every single time when I'm first doing this? And but yeah, that's important. I saw somebody in the chat said, yeah, values driven ERP. That's really what we're talking about. And that I, as a therapist, am not here to arbitrarily tell you what to do. I'm here to collaborate with you to get you closer and closer to your goals.
All right. So your book uses the powerful word thriving, which I love. I love.
Mhm.
What does thriving, quote unquote, look like for someone living with OCD?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it can look like whatever you want it to look like, but here's what I'll say, because thriving is going to be different for each person based on like what they want. But here's what I'll say it's not, and this is the bummer. So just like I'll do the pessimistic part first. Thriving doesn't mean living a life without any intrusive thoughts ever. Thriving does not mean not having any OC content arise, at least not for me. I'll speak for personal experience. It's kind of few and far between now the times when OCD is like loud. Um, that being said, it means sort of embracing the brain that you have, the tendencies that you have, your intensely creative, imaginative brain that's going to give you all this junk. And it means saying, okay, I can still have relationships that I want with this. So I think that on a number of levels, we can just talk about symptoms getting in the way of relationships, but I talk a lot in the book as well about that sense of like shame or otherness, like feeling so, I just remember feeling so weird and feeling so like, I don't think anybody else's brain is doing this. Um, and I would look around like at school if somebody got sick and they threw up or something like that, and I was panicking, and I would look around and there were kids just kind of like, that's kind of gross, but whatever, they're moving on. And I'm over here like, I got to do these rituals. I got to keep myself safe. I got to hold my breath. I got to make sure that I don't wear this shirt again. Because if I wear this shirt again, and all of that was really hidden. I mean, my parents would be like, where did your clothes go? And I'd be like, I don't know. And I was hiding shirts because they had this like magical rule that if I don't wear them for 2 weeks, then I won't get sick. Which on the one level, I kind of, even at that age, I was like, this is not true. Um, so I think that sense of like otherness, the shame, the hiding it, the kind of like, I know this is weird. A lot of that is, I will tell people if you're willing to, and it's an exposure to try to create relationships with other people. Because you know what? There are people out there who they're not going to understand, and you can't predict that. You may disclose to somebody and they may say like, whoa, don't like those thoughts. I'm out. Okay. That could happen. Those are not your people. I don't want those people in my life. I don't, there's a level of compassion that is missing there. Um, so thriving means surrounding yourself by people, with people who get it. And that doesn't just mean other people with OCD. That means the people in your life who are willing to say like, hey, you are important enough that I want to understand this and help you through this. And yeah, and just like be an ally, in your fight against OCD or in your coexistence with OCD? Because I think a lot of recovery becomes less, my relationship with OCD at this point is less adversarial and it's more just kind of like, okay, buddy, I hear you. Like, you want me to check and make sure my dog didn't eat poison, but like, I got things to do.
No, I think it's really important you called it sort of like, I don't know, a downer or whatever, but it's helpful for people when you're trying to define what recovery looks like what
Hmm.
is the objective? So for me, the first thing I read, and this is not about me, but this will help ask my next question. The first thing that I read the day after I was diagnosed is OCD cannot be cured. And I was completely demoralized and angry because my doctor hadn't, and I was afraid that if I got that, I was in the Marines, I was afraid that a diagnosis of any mental illness was going to get me booted out and that I would
Right.
lose my family and I would never be a lawyer and blah, blah, blah. And my doctor basically, calmed me down and said, people debate this topic of cure round and round. They don't even know what causes OCD, much less whether it could be cured, whatever that means. He goes, what I want you never to forget is that we know that people who have OCD, even severe OCD, can learn to basically lead virtually symptom-free lives. Doesn't mean the thoughts go away, but they are able to live full lives. It's possible to get better. So that became, I just redefined the word cure for my own purposes. He didn't tell me this, but I just said, if I can get to a place where OCD doesn't adversely affect my life, even if it's present, that'll be good because I know the hell I'm living in right now. If I can get there, that's cool. So, and I try to describe for people the object isn't to make OCD go away, right? In fact,
Mhm.
all you're doing is challenging the disorder by that. It's how do I learn to let OCD be here and not adversely affect my life, right? So that was really the outlook that I had going through the whole process, and I'm very happy to say it doesn't affect me anymore, right? OCD knows that I'm completely disinterested with it, right?
Right.
So getting there to this thriving point, right, is a very windy up and down journey. And it is immensely scary in the moment, right? Even if you're telling yourself, this is not me, it's scary because it feels so real. When OCD this is my question now. Sorry for that long introduction. When OCD is screaming at you loudly in the moment that you're making a horrible mistake, right? People are going to get hurt. Fill in the blank of what the concept, what the threat is coming from OCD. When it's the loudest, how do you explain to people or advise people to still do the necessary work in not giving in, let's say, to a compulsion when it is so scary, with this context that you can still let these thoughts be here,
Mm.
right? So what do you tell them, if that question makes sense? But it really is at that fork in the road moment when your anxiety is up here and the risk feels really palpable and real,
Mm.
and yet you can't do the very thing that your brain naturally wants you to do to try to fix it. How do you get them through that scary moment and tell them it's okay if the thoughts are there?
Yeah. Well, there are a number of different things that I would do depending on the person and kind of how they're put together, what their symptoms are. One of the things that I tell people though is because like I said earlier, I think so much of what's happening is internal and so much of what's happening is like the looping over and over again is I say, and I know this is somewhat akin to a lot of like what other people in the field say is see if you can concentrate a little bit on I can tolerate this feeling as opposed to I am arguing with the content. So there are some people, and again, I'm a big fan of maybe, maybe not, right? Like that's tolerating uncertainty is a big part of this. And I think in those moments, sort of reminding yourself, oof, if I engage with this content right now, if I say, maybe the bad thing's going to happen and I'm already up here, taking a step back and sort of saying, almost like, so from ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, there's this way that we can look at our thoughts. It's called cognitive diffusion. There's a way in which we can look at our thoughts as just sort of like the mental junk that kind of comes, washes up on the shore, and getting a little bit of distance and saying, I notice I'm having a scary thought is really different from engaging with the thought itself. I notice I'm having a scary thought. I notice I'm having a scary sensation. I love how you put it. It's a fork in the road. It's a fork in the road. And you've been taking, and listen, you've been taking the OCD fork over and over and over again. So that is a well-worn neurological path, right? Of course, it's the path of least resistance in the moment. So be kind to yourself if you want to take that path. That's the one, that's the familiar one. You kind of know where it goes. But saying, ooh, this is really uncomfortable. This path, there's brambles, there's a thicket, it's dark up there, it's shrouded in fog. And being able to say, I have done these other things that have been difficult. I have flown into the fog, or I have walked into the darkness. And I have this team of people. I have my therapist, I have my family members, I have my partner, whomever. I'm going to cultivate some willingness to go here. Not because I'm like, oh, the bad thing might happen and I accept that the bad thing might happen and I'm engaging with the content, but I see myself in this moment as a resilient person, as a warrior, or I'm leading with my heart, whatever it is. And I try to help people come up with what is the part of you that is willing to fight OCD. And can that part lead you down this path? And again, that's going to look different. I've worked with people who have been, I've worked with professional athletes with OCD where, I'll say like, do you remember when you were playing, this game and this final of this this year. And do you remember that moment when you were just like, it hurt? You were out there and it hurt. It hurt to keep going. How did you do that? Okay, that part of you, is that the part that can be willing to take this path? So those are some of the things that I do. And everybody has that. Everybody has resilience. People with OCD are already tremendously resilient. To be in the world with OCD, I think, is to be resilient.
Yeah, I love that answer. I love that answer.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's the way I describe it for people is at that fork in the road. Yeah, this might be a familiar path of least, but you know where that takes you,
Yeah.
right? We know where that takes you. The other one's hard, but your people are telling you this is where this takes you,
Mhm.
right? So one of these, but you have pain either way. One's eternal pain. You can just stay in that hell pit, I called it, or
Mhm.
you can do some productive pain here, right? And endure this uncomfortable moment or moments or day or week, whatever, however long it takes you, it doesn't matter. But you stay on this path. I love that, right? And the resilience piece that we
Yeah.
are already resilient.
Yes.
Everybody is resilient. And people with OCD, you've shown your resilience, right? Just look back, right? You look at it and say, it's evidence to yourself.
Yep.
I've been through a whole lot.
Can I
I
say
can,
one more thing, Shannon,
please.
about that? I think that as you were talking, another thing that I tell people is hope is not a familiar emotion for a lot of people with OCD, especially severe OCD. So it makes sense when I say, hey, there's this other path. They're like, I've heard that. I've heard that from OCD that if I do X, Y, and Z, if I do these compulsions, that it will be okay, that I do. And so I tell people, if you're not ready to feel hope, I understand that. I am going to feel it on your behalf. I'm going to hold it on your behalf. I am hopeful for you. Let me hold your hope. And then let hope itself be an exposure because it is. Hope is the sort of thing that many people with OCD have been sort of punished by having hope, right? Like, well, I thought I could do this. And then I thought that, I had hope and then OCD dashed it, or OCD gave me false hope. OCD said, if I do everything perfectly, This is going to go away. And so acknowledging that, of course, it's hard to have hope. You have been reinforced not to have hope, but I want to teach you a different way. And you end up feeling a little bit like a motivational speaker. But if that's what it takes,
Oh,
that's
absolutely. It's probably 90% of what I do.
yeah,
Since I don't provide therapy, right? I'm like the
yeah.
coach in the corner. All right, for parents, partners, friends, all watching, what's the healthiest way to support someone without accidentally feeding into their OCD?
I think being able to have conversations about OCD, like I will sometimes prescribe. I'm not a prescriber, but I will assign uh, check-ins about OCD, trusting the person with OCD to tell you, hey, actually, it felt really good in the moment, but this was also, I think, keeping me stuck. Have those check-ins if they're on a weekly basis, if they're on a monthly basis. That would be like for spouses or between two adults. And as I mentioned, it's about not being accommodating, which sometimes can mean not providing specific types of reassurance, doesn't mean that you can't be supportive. So, relationship OCD, for example, which can manifest as how do I know if you're right for me? How do I know if you love me? If that is, it's hard as a partner if somebody says, do you love me? Do you still love me? Are you still in this? It's hard to say, I'm not going to answer that. Um, If it is determined, however, that that is an OCD symptom, it is very reasonable to say, I'm not going to answer that because I know that this is going to make your OCD stronger. I want a strong relationship with you. I don't want you to have a stronger relationship with your OCD. So I'm not going to answer that right now. What's tough is in a lot of relationships, reassurance is a part of it, especially in new relationships. And so determining, hey, if that's been kind of asked and answered, um, then sort of reducing it there. I would say for parents, you're also developing a sense of resilience and independence in a young person, which, one of the things part of the reason that I like working with 6 and 7 year olds is because that's when my symptoms kind of came online. And I feel like by being able to give them what, I didn't have for many reasons back then. I think OCD, having been born in the late 70s, I think, yeah, OCD treatment when I was coming up was not what it is now. And I also was super secretive. I would say for parents of kids saying, hey, you know what? I know how brave you are. And so I know this is scary, but I know brave Amy is going to be able to do this, that, and the other. And so it's also about developing an identity around bravery because kids are already, again, super brave. I mean, think about all the things they have to learn in such a short amount of time, all the novel situations that they have to endure, many of which are quite scary. So that's what I would say, depending on sort of the nature of the relationship.
Yeah, the final one on that is because I know it can be trying both for in relationships and family settings, trying to help somebody, particularly a treatment refuser, right? But
Yeah.
how do you maintain the balance between compassion and setting limits and saying like,
Yeah.
no, I'm not doing that, right?
Sometimes painfully isn't the answer. I mean, sometimes, and I say that to acknowledge for those of you who might be watching this who are family members that it hurts. OCD does not just hurt the person who is experiencing the symptoms. It hurts others. And those of you with OCD, that's not to, no shade. I'm one of those people too. It's like, but it hurts everybody. It hurts us. It hurts people in our orbit. And it can be really painful to figure out what that balance is. And there may be, like I said, there may be some times at which either family members, spouses will say, you know what? This is not working for me right now. I am not willing to accommodate you in this way. And that could lead to ruptures in the relationship. I just want to say, that can happen. And I know if you had Dr. Pollard on, then he may have talked a little bit about that with treatment sort of,
Mhm.
resistance and things like that. But it is, I think people who are family members or loved ones, you have to remember to take care of yourself as well. And sometimes if taking care of yourself means, you know what, I am not I'm not willing to continue having this conversation. We're going around and around and around. I'm going to take some space and take care of myself. Sometimes that's a limit as well. And it doesn't mean I'm sick of you and your OCD. It's ridiculous. I need to get out of here. That's not helpful. But it can be, I'm really frustrated. I know you're really frustrated too. I need to take space because I need to take care of myself. Really, I want everybody to be modeling caretaking. And the way that I can, if I have a loved one with OCD and there's reassurance seeking, reassurance seeking, reassurance seeking, or if I have a kiddo with, let's use this example because this is like the final boss when you have a kid with OCD and they're trying to get you to, they want you to, can you just open this? I don't want to touch it or whatever it is. Well, you don't love me. Whew,
Yeah.
that's tough. That is tough as a parent to be like, you're not going to be like, maybe, maybe, maybe not, and then walk out. But
Sure.
to say, I do love you, and because I love you, and I don't want to support your OCD, I'm gonna, I'm gonna leave the room now. You've thrown the jar of peanut butter at me or whatever it is, and I'm taking space. I need to take care of myself. Of course, you want to make sure the kiddo is safe. But those are some of the cases I really, some of the families I love working with because these kids are like, and that's how it feels to them. You don't love me if you don't do these things. And so giving parents language to say, it's because I do love you and I want the best for you and I see this future for you, I'm going to remove myself.
All right. So two final questions, and then we'll go to the Q&A. So the first one is really designed more. I know that you train therapists, right? You're training the young people or even the old people who are starting this new. You're one of the trainers. You get them into it. And I know many, many, many therapists, and I know how difficult your world is, right? This is a tough job going in every day and helping people who are suffering immensely and on many different levels about many different things. So it's a tough job. What do you tell new therapists coming into this line of work when it feels so daunting? What do you tell them that can make them understand that the work is rewarding, right? Like your sacrifice is worth it. What do you say to them?
Yeah. Well, when I'm working with really new therapists, I actually leave it open to like, I will say this work isn't for everyone, and that's okay. So I want you to be honest with yourself about whether or not, thank you, Chris, about whether or not this is something that's as we're going through and you're doing this kind of work and you're finding yourself, many people, when they start as therapists, they're told like, oh, you're going to help comfort people and everybody's going to feel great. And you're going to like, and that is part of it, right? Over time. But I will say, you have to be willing as a therapist to sit with some really heavy stuff in the room. Because if you're not able to sit in the heavy stuff, if you're going to want to quote unquote rescue somebody in the middle of an exposure, or if you're simply going to hear about some of the impact of OCD, and that's going to personally feel like intolerable to you, I want you to be able to identify that and maybe like not do this work. That's my protective side. I'm like, if you can't it's like if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen kind of thing. That being said, that's few and far between. Most people are getting into this field, even the trainees, even the students are getting into this field because they already have this sense of, I want to make this kind of difference. So I will do a lot of, I like to show sometimes when we have clients at our clinic who graduate from therapy, or we call it graduating with kids, um, they'll share letters and things like that. So I'll say, okay, so I know I'm going to tell you about doing all these things that feel really uncomfortable in the therapy room. And here is what I want you to think about. Here's the finish line. Just like when I'm talking about with family members, I'm saying, hey, here's the kind of relationship we want to get toward. Here's the finish line. I know it's like way at the top of this mountain. And again, there's a lot of fog and what have you. Um, but I think tying it back to that and saying, you will, should you choose to accept this mission, should you choose to pursue this, you're going to change lives. You're going to give people their lives back. And you are going to be tremendously, more than anything, you are going to be bowled over and impressed by the people that you work with and their bravery and their resilience. And it's an honor and a privilege to be able to be a witness to that. So that's what you have if you want to do this. Is it going to be uncomfortable? Of course. Is it going to maybe bring up some stuff in you? Of course. Um, those are some of the things.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue into my final question for you before we go to the Q&A piece of this. Um, what is your message of, I know we talked about the word hope, but ultimately it's important for people to know that their hard work in trying to recover has a reward, right? And it's worth it. So what is your message to people who are truly suffering and love this idea about recovery, but they feel like they're at the bottom of the hell pit right now? What's your message to them about
Mhm.
recovery?
One message that I have is, and this is most applicable to people who are right at the start, they're right at the bottom of the pit, is that one of the gifts that, many of us with OCD have is like there's this tendency to really look at things in black and white terms or in, all or nothing terms and things like that. And I think the tendency to say, well, if I'm not able to achieve this easily or quickly, then I am a failure. I think that's something that stymies a lot of motivation or makes people feel like, well, okay, if I'm at the bottom of the mountain or I'm at the bottom of the pit or whatever metaphor you want to use, and I can't even see that, I can't even see it, I don't feel like I can get there. And so one of the things that I'll say is, I want you to think about every day you get up and you leave the house or you don't because of OCD, the things that you're already doing that you are enduring with pain, that you are enduring with suffering, you know, most people, when I talk to them, they already have these daily wins. And especially if they've made it into my office, they're doing an exposure right there. And so saying to them, okay, I know it might feel like it's imperceptible that you are climbing the mountain, but I want you to, if you're climbing a mountain, you don't stare at the summit and just like huff and puff, right? And it's so far away and that's not motivating. You look at one foot in front of the other, one foot in front of the other. And then sometimes you have to deviate. You go a little bit down the mountain. We talk about recovery is not linear. So those would be some of the things as I say, just keep it really small scale, seemingly small scale, but sometimes those early steps are actually, they might look like little steps to others, but those are profound messages to your OCD.
Absolutely. Amen. Amen a thousand times. Focus on what you control in the moment, right? And
Yeah.
just keep trying to do that. You don't have to worry about all this other stuff.
Hmm.
Just focus on what you control right now, in the moment. And you control whether you take that step forward. You
Hmm.
control whether you give OCD what it wants or you don't, right?
Yep.
It doesn't feel like you're in control, but you actually are, right?
Yes.
That's you. And OCD cannot take that away from you, that power. It never take it. You could give it away, but OCD can't take it from you. Very powerful words. Very powerful words. All right. This is the time that if anybody has a question, you can ask it. If nobody has any questions, then that's fine. You've explained everything very well, so sometimes people don't have questions, but I'll open it now to see if anybody has any questions. And
Well,
if
I think
you do,
a few
I
in
don't see
the
it.
chat or
Yeah, did you, Matt? So the chat.
Matthew had asked, where can we find your book, Dr. Mariaskin? Which, by the way,
Oh, there you
everybody
are.
here can call me Amy. Mariaskin is 4 syllables, Russian, and not easy. So yeah. Is that okay, Shannon, if I just start with that one?
Yeah, that's fine. So I had my chat box open, but it was
Mhm.
hiding all of the questions that were, but I didn't see them.
Oh,
I didn't even see when Chris left. So thank you for telling goodbye to Chris. Um, okay, yeah. So that did you answer it?
no, 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 not yet.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so the book was published in 2022 by New Harbinger Publications. So you can either go to their website and find it there, or you can go to like Amazon. There's an audiobook version as well. It's and the person who's reading it has a lovely British accent. They didn't consult me, but I would have chosen that. It's really soothing to listen to. So there's audiobook, there's I guess it's called ebook, like Kindle version and print book. And I'm so glad, Shannon, that you said the full title of the book because I know the title of my book until you get to the colon and then I can't remember it, which I don't know why I haven't committed that to memory. There's got to be something about that. But yeah, thank you for asking.
We can make an acronym for the subtitle, right?
Yeah,
So,
right, right.
um, okay. So next question comes from I want to say Nicole. Your intensive treatment program is only for 15 plus year olds? Question mark.
Yes, so right now at our clinic in Nashville, we have so it's not quite. So for those of you, I'm going to do a little primer on different levels of care for treatment. And so you have kind of your traditional outpatient treatment, which is generally like weekly or maybe bi-weekly, so twice a week for OCD treatment. And for some people, that's simply not enough. It doesn't kind of meet them. We say, we want thinking about it like medication, you want the dosage to address the severity of whatever the concern is. So then you have intensive outpatient, which is generally about 15 hours a week. I think like 10 to 15. And that is multiple times a week. Sometimes it can be a little bit lower, but it's multiple times a week, 3 to 5 times a week for multiple hours. Then you have partial hospitalization, which is even more. So that's usually about 30 hours a week. And then you have like a residential program where you would actually live somewhere. Okay, so between the outpatient weekly and the IOP level, um, our clinic in Nashville is it's somewhere in between there. So it's 4 hours a week of treatment. There are 2 therapists who work with people. And the question was, is that for people 15 and older? I That's what we're doing right now to pilot it. If there is another, if there's a kiddo who would need something more intensive, what I would do is all of the questionnaires that come into all of the inquiries that come into our clinic. Um, I'm a little neurotic. Let me reframe. I like to be involved and I like to make sure that people end up where it's going to be most effective for them. So what I would say with that is I review all of those initial questionnaires. And if we had somebody who was younger, who was a good candidate for the 4 hour a week program, I would definitely consider that. And so, still fill that information out. It's just that we've only really had clients who are 15 and older now, so I kind of know that it works. So they'd be a bit of a guinea pig.
So Matthew's always good about this. What is for everybody your website? Do you have the URL off the top of your
Oh,
head?
yeah, yeah, I do. It's just ocdnashville.com.
OCDnashville.com. So I encourage everybody to go to the website. I also encourage everybody to buy the book. Um, and for everybody who watches this recorded, um, it'll be in the chat, right, for you when you watch it. So, but
Yeah,
OCDnashville.com.
I'll put it in there right now. And then there we go. Um, and
Okay.
I was going to say also at OCD Nashville. Well, we also have Instagram for it's kind of the clinic's Instagram. It's at OCD Nashville. Um, I don't do it as much lately because I am, as an individual with uh, ADHD as well, I tend to get really into hobbies and then I'm like, oh, I'm done with that. For a while, I was making a lot of mental health comics, many of which have to do with OCD. And so those comics are at OCD Nashville. And a lot of those, like I said, they're applicable to OCD and they're talking about some of the things that we've talked about. I think there's a comic about accommodation. There's a comic about lots of comics about hope and things like that. And so it's just been another creative way to spread some messages.
Okay. I don't see any other questions. If you have one, now's your chance. Okay. I truly am grateful and honored that you chose to join us today. This will be recorded so people can watch this forever. And uh, I want to thank you just for being the very wonderful, humble human being that you are, so compassionate and caring. You have an amazing story as a person with lived experience, and then taking this to the next level to dedicate your life to helping others who suffer from this horribly debilitating disorder that is treatable, right? I tell people the good news is that we suffer from a disorder that is treatable. And
Mhm.
then the great news is that you have all the power to recover already within you, right? So we have a disorder that's treatable, and you already have the power to do it. You cannot be defeated by this disorder. You cannot.
Mm.
And I say it unequivocally, and I call it an irrefutable truth that
Mm.
if you do the things that make this disorder weaker, it will get weaker,
Yeah.
right? It's an irrefutable truth. And people say, how can you say that? I say, because it's true. I know it's true. And I encourage everybody to do the fact that it can be done doesn't make it easy to do, but the fact that it can be done makes it possible for you to do. So do the do piece. Anyway, Amy, thank you so much. You're an amazing person. I cherish our friendship. I cherish the fact that you are willing to do programs like this and spread the word. You're saving a lot of lives, and God is smiling on you. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And I will say too, it's an honor to be here. And I feel like doing this work has just enhanced my life beyond, I'm not somebody who's like, well, it must have been my calling or anything like that. But sometimes I'm like, that's probably also because I'm like, well, what if I have a new hobby? But but I really do feel like it is, yeah, it is this interaction that also, fills me. So I
Yeah.
appreciate
All
it.
right. Everybody have a great weekend or rest of your weekend. And I mm, I don't even have my next guest. I'll check my list and then I'll publicize it. But this is going to go on right now. I'm filled up until I think June of next year, every couple of weeks. So the dream team shall continue. So thank you for being on the dream team, and thank you for being here. Everybody have a wonderful weekend, and we will conclude. All right. Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.